In the 1980s, Nabisco ran into a problem with their graham crackers, and that is it couldn't earn the Heart Healthy logo on the side of the box. And that was a time when the nation was obsessed with low fat, and that was a problem for their brand because they started off as a health biscuit. The food industry has great food engineers, but this wasn't an easy problem to solve because you can't just remove fat without consumers saying, ugh, tastes like cardboard, might as well eat the box. The first principle of food engineering is there's a perfect combination of fat, sugar, and salt that creates a bliss point where no one can resist your food anymore. There's a great book about this by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Michael Moss, that I found fascinating. Here's the thing, food ingredients are listed by weight, so 2% low-fat milk gets 35% of its calories from fat. And that's because one of the other components, water, has no calories, but it's quite heavy. So the food engineers had two choices. They could remove fat, or they could add something that had weight that wasn't fat. They decided to leave the graham cracker alone and add a layer of sugar and cinnamon to the top, therefore reducing the percentage of fat by weight, getting the Heart Healthy logo, because sugar. They cleverly decided to market it as a new product, cinnamon grams, because it's a great way to win more shelf space and also push your competitors off the shelf at the same time. Just look at the enormous success of Oreos taking over the shelves with carrot cake and caramel coconut and chocolate peanut butter pie and chocolate marshmallow and Oreo thins and Thins Bites and Thins Bites fudge dip and fudge covered dark chocolate and golden Oreos and golden double stuffs and golden thins and mint creams and dark chocolate and double stuff and mega stuffs and minis and caramel coconut. Wow. But engineering the product was only half the problem because there was the marketing. And they knew that women did most of the shopping and they cared about the health of their husbands and wanted heart-healthy foods, but the men didn't want anything to do with dieting or low fat. So shoppers would stand in front of the two versions and try to decide which one to buy. If they bought the one with the heart-healthy logo, would their husbands eat it or would they get mad? Well, nice supermarket ladies to the rescue.
Hi, ma'am. Would you like to try one of these cinnamon grams? They are delicious.
Oh, thank you, but I'm very afraid my husband won't try it. I'll take a bite, though. Ooh, that's a good cracker.
Yes. Isn't it good? It's a new recipe.
Honey, you got the wrong crackers. These are low fat. Oh, no, honey, they're delicious. I tried them at the store. Just take a little bite. I already know I don't want it. Oh, please, just a small bite. Hey, that's a pretty good cracker. How'd they do that? It's a new recipe, honey, and it's better for you. Turns out the cinnamon grams were so delicious, the average husband would eat 5 or 6 of them instead of 4 like he did the old crackers. Same fat per cracker, more calories, more sugar, but heart healthy. And from there, the sky was the limit. Turns out children have a sweeter bliss point than adults do, so products designed for children have even more sugar. Oh, come on, Chris, you're being a little bit harsh. Graham crackers are whole grains. Look, 8 grams per serving. Given the trickery around the term low fat, I wondered if there could be a little bit of trickery around the term whole grain. And indeed there was. That story begins in 1790 when Oliver Evans invented a genius new grist mill, and he got patent number 3, which in the day had to be signed by the President of the United States, which was George Washington. And Washington, recognizing how good the patent was, said, I need one of those for my property.
And George Washington becomes one of the first men in the early United States to have the newest and finest gristmill innovation. The bolter is a large reel inside a wooden case that rotates by water power, allowing the flour to sift through silk, known as bolting cloth or silk. This grades the flour into superfine white flour, which was the highest commodity, brought the most value and price. It also makes a fine flour, which we would know today as whole wheat, and it also separates the bran. The bran was not thrown out. It was used to make hardtack biscuit and was sold locally in Alexandria. Right along the river, all the sea captains would purchase this product and make the hardtack biscuit.
Oliver Evans became a great hero of the Industrial Revolution, and well-deserved for the automation he brought to a very labor-intensive process of grinding flour. He even figured out a clever automated way to cool and dry the flour. His mill made vast quantities of fine white flour available to the masses. 40 years later, a man by the name of Sylvester Graham became a famous health advocate in the United States, and he believed the fine flour from the Evans mill was like sugar and it wasn't healthy. He even wrote a book about it in 1837. He became so famous for it that ground wheat that wasn't separated became known as graham flour. And graham crackers were originally made of graham flour and no sugar. By the way, Sylvester Graham owned a bunch of boarding houses in the Northeast where people could come learn his principles of nutrition. One of the early attendees was Ellen White, later to become co-founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who penned a simple health code that was strikingly similar to Sylvester Graham's, and her followers went on to become the healthiest people in the world, whether they lived in Los Angeles or Norway or Japan. About 10 years ago, I asked a guy who was vice president of a company that made well-known loaves of whole wheat bread for supermarket shelves whether he was concerned about some of the up-and-coming bakeries I saw in the farmer's market. And he said, no, not at all, because they never go mainstream. I asked, how can you be so confident? He said it's because those breads contain the germ, which makes the bread a little too heavy for mass market appeal and also decreases the shelf life. Wait, what? I thought your breads were whole grain. It is whole grain, he said. The government owns the definition of whole grain and they provide an exclusion for germ. It's a food safety issue, so it doesn't go rancid on the shelf. Wait, what? Me being me, I had to get a hold of that definition, but it turns out it varies by country. However, the European Union put a massive effort into determining one definition to rule them all. It turns out there's more to the story than you could ever imagine, and I got very nervous when I saw how many meetings they were having with 50 scientists apiece to come up with this one definition. And here it is, 9 fairly fine print pages. I think there are 2 important concepts. Number 1, 90% of mills crack the wheat and separate out the white from the germ from the bran. That way they can process each component separately. For example, with the germ, they can deactivate the oils with toasting. With the white part, they can process it to make it irresistible. And after that, they can recombine them to reconstitute the whole grain, not necessarily from the same batch of wheat. The second thing about the definition of whole grains is it's considered a whole grain if it's more than 51% whole grain flour. I would have liked to be a fly on the wall in those meetings when they discussed that. This was all sounding pretty significant, but I didn't realize how significant until bringing out the biggest gun of them all, David A. Kessler. This dude was appointed FDA commissioner by George H.W. Bush, and he's the man who exposed the tobacco companies for what they were doing and brought the smoking rate in the U.S. down to 20%, one of the lowest of any nation in the world. David went on to become the dean of Yale's medical school, and 10 years ago he published this book, The End of Overeating, about the tricks the food companies play. Wouldn't we all love to stop overeating? David just wrote a new book here in 2020 called Fast Carbs, Slow Carbs, which is all about educating us and exposing the food companies. Unfortunately, his conclusion is that when you separate a whole grain into its 3 components and you process each one separately to make it delicious and irresistible, and then reconstitute them, the health effects and the ability for people to resist them is about the same as white flour. Fortunately, if you live by a local baker who grinds fresh whole grains daily and keeps them in one piece, you can still get some seriously healthy and really delicious breads. Our favorite local baker says the keys to a great loaf are the freshly milled grains. The aromatics of this flour mean everything to the flavor of the bread and especially the crust, he says. The warm fats from the germ of the wheat berry smell like lightly toasted almond. 60% of calories consumed in the United States right now is from processed foods. No wonder we can't lose the weight or get healthy. The thing is that food engineers have a serious unfair advantage over Mother Nature because she doesn't combine fat with sweet. She gives us avocados, which are fat. She gives us dates, which are sweet, but she doesn't make date-avocados. I don't know what that would even look like, and if we wanted to be food engineers and make them, we'd have to strip out the fiber, we'd have to add sugar and salt, and then would it be oobleck? When I was a teen, I got to caddy for the great Jack LaLanne, who was then America's most famous health and fitness advocate. And he used to tell us, if man made it, don't eat it. He wasn't talking about whole grain bread because you could buy LaLanne bread in the day. But he was talking about processed food, and that is the best dietary advice I have ever received.
You eat a lot of white bread and sugar and cakes and pies.
Well,
I said a naughty word.
That's the thing of the past, Jack. I wouldn't have white flour in the house. No, I never eat a bit of white bread. I just use the whole grain, and I do my own baking.
I plan to end the episode right there until my buddy Craig said,
That's it, Baldy? You can't just leave us hanging. What are we supposed to eat?
so off to the grocery store to check out the options for Craig. The good news is the whole grain bread section of my store is pretty popular. The question is, what gives these breads a long shelf life and mass appeal to consumers? This trusted brand promises no nonsense ingredients. The nonsense ingredients in it include sugar, wheat starch, soybean oil, polydextrose, soy lecithin, whey, and cellulose fiber. The cellulose fiber probably comes from wood pulp. Because it's cheap, it gives food a smooth texture, it's inert, although it doesn't have the nutritional benefits of whole grain fiber. I see why they doubled the fiber. It's to get the fiber content as high as the added sugar content. Polydextrose actually appears on the ingredients list ahead of cellulose. It's a synthetic compound that's a mild sweetener, but the government allows it to appear on the nutrition label as a fiber. I really don't know what the long-term health effects are on, say, our microbiome because it's not inert like cellulose is. I don't know if anybody knows. I tried to take out a calculator and compare the nutritional aspects of Wonder Bread to these whole grain breads, but it's pretty hard to do. It's about the same calorie-wise. The whole grain breads actually have more sugar. Dave's Killer Bread has 6 grams of sugar, a teaspoon and a half for 2 slices. And in terms of fiber, they also have more, but I can't tell what of that fiber really acts like fiber and what is fake fiber. So anyway, I'd call these whole grain supermarket breads the 4th best option. I'd say the 3rd best option is to go to the freezer section and get Food for Life bread if your store has it. They call it flourless and it's probably the healthiest option of all. The grains are sprouted and then crushed to make the bread, and there's multiple grains and beans with no added nonsense like sugar. The reason I didn't list it as top option is mass appeal of frozen bread is limited. The 2nd best option is to find friends like Yvonne, Aaron, and Vin who bake their own fresh bread and to leech off them. Fortunately, baking your own bread has become a popular thing in our area. We're lucky enough to have local bakers who grind their own grains fresh. It's almost as good as leeching off your friends, except you have to pay. And the best option is to do what my crush did and buy one of the many grinders on the market. And get one of the many convenient bread machines and voila, fresh warm bread. Just beware of neighbors who suddenly turn into leeches. Oh, you're going to want to subscribe because the next episode is on your fascinating poop. You know you're wondering what it's telling you. Also, crapsules. Are they going to be the new probiotic craze? Ugh. I bet the turkey baster company never imagined one of its uses.